You might note the absence of Mr. Paolo Corsini, the head of the delegation of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. The reason he's not here today is that, as you might know, this week in Strasbourg, the session of the Assembly is taking place, and he had to leave today at noon together with his entire delegation for a very important vote. However, he asked me to inform you all of his total agreement with the statement of our International Election Observation Mission, which will be delivered today. So our panelists here will deliver the statement and offer some remarks on various aspects of the election, and then we will have time for questions. So we'll start with Mr. Roberto Vitelli, who's a member of the Slovenian Parliament and has been appointed as Special Coordinator of the OSCE Short-Term Observer Mission. And then we'll hear from Mr. Eduard Kukan, to my left here, who is a member of the European Parliament and has led the European Parliament's delegation of observers. Then we will hear from Ms. Marietta Today, who's a member of the Italian Parliament and has led the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly's delegation. And last but not least, we will hear from Ambassador Peter Taylor, who has served as the head of mission of OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights Mission. So with that, I will give the floor to Mr. Vitelli. Mr. Vitelli, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen from the media, dear colleagues and friends, I too would like to welcome you here on behalf of the members of our International Election Observation Mission from the OSCE, the Council of Europe's Parliamentary Assembly, and the European Parliament. All day yesterday and into the night, we have been through a hot day of observation, and although some rumors and media reports would have liked to create a different impression, I am glad that the election day was much less heated than the weather. I would also like to underline that while the counting and other parts of the electoral process are going on, our friends from the ODIHR continue their observation. I thank the country, its authorities, and the election administration, which did their job under very difficult circumstances, for an inclusive registration of international and national observers and their cooperation. I have been to this country very often, being the OSCE PA Special Representative of the region, and have also led the short-term OSCE observer missions before, so I can compare today's situation with the past. But before I will make a personal remark on this, let me read out the statement that all members of the International Observation Mission have agreed on. The 25th of June 2017 parliamentary elections took place following a political agreement between the leaders of the Socialist Party and Democratic Party that secured the participation of the opposition. Electoral contestants were able to campaign freely and fundamental freedoms were respected. At the same time, the implementation of the political agreement created challenges for the election administration and resulted in a selective and inconsistent application of the law. The continued politicization of election-related bodies and institutions, as well as widespread allegations of vote buying and pressure on voters, reduced public trust in the electoral process. During an overall orderly election day, in a significant number of voting centers observed, important procedures were not fully respected. There were also delays in counting in many areas. Key procedural irregularities and omissions were observed. This included inconsistent inking verification procedures, instances of proxy and group voting, and interference by unauthorized party activists. Concerns were noted about possible intimidation by groups of party activists in and around voting centers. The counting process was delayed in many areas. Counting procedures were not always followed, and transparency was not always guaranteed. The elections were held in the context of the long-standing and deep political division between the SP and DP, as well as low public trust in the electoral process. The internationally mediated political agreement that was reached on the 18th of May allowed the DP to nominate several key ministerial positions, including a deputy prime minister and chairs of other institutions. Legal changes following the political agreement aimed to enhance campaign finance oversight and ensure free of charge advertising in all broadcast media. Their implementation, however, demonstrated the primacy of political interests over respect for the rule of law. The legal framework in place in this country provides an adequate basis for the conduct of democratic elections, even though many prior recommendations of our institutions were not addressed. The late introduction of legal changes and lack of a meaningful public consultation challenged legal certainty and negatively affected the administration of several electoral components at odds with OEC commitments and Council of Europe standards. The Central Election Commission operated transparently with regular public sessions. Following the political agreement, the CSC and its secretariat faced a complex set of legal, institutional, financial, and administrative challenges. Despite this, it implemented its core tasks. It did, however, not take measures to clarify inconsistencies related to newly amended legislation, and some of its decisions were not consistent or legally sound. Overall, no significant issues related to the accuracy of the voter list were raised. Restrictions on voter registration related to age and mental disability are, however, at odds with OEC commitments and international standards. While largely inclusive, the candidate registration process suffered from selective and inconsistent application of the law and was, at times, based on the political agreement rather than the law. The campaign presented a variety of political options. Fundamental freedoms of assembly and expression were respected. At the same time, it was characterized by widespread allegations of vote buying, concerns over misuse of state resources, and workplace-related pressures on voters, which further reduced public trust. Also here, the ODIHR long-term observation can provide you with more, including on gender-related campaign issues. Amended legislation contributed to transparency and accountability of campaign financing, addressing some earlier recommendations. On the other hand, transparency was reduced by the absence of disclosure requirements before election day. Media provided the electorate with extensive campaign coverage and a range of political opinions, while offering a limited analytical approach and focusing on the three main party leaders. The public broadcaster complied with the legal obligation to provide proportional free airtime to parties. National minorities were generally afforded a fair opportunity to participate in the elections, both as candidates and voters, including in mother languages. Our written text gives you some more details on this. The responsibility for handling complaints about violations of campaign regulations remained unclear, but procedural rights of the parties were observed, and the decisions of the college were reasoned, although not always consistent. Again, I refer to the written text for more details that will be distributed at the end of this press conference. So far, the preliminary conclusions. Ladies and gentlemen, the 18th of May agreement was important and crucial in order to make an election in which all major parties participated. It also created high expectations regarding major improvements in the conduct of the elections and do away with some long-standing issues. I'm therefore sort of disappointed that many of them, and in particular the climate of distrust and perceived pressure, persisted also through these elections. As a result of the grip that political parties have on the country and its institutions. It is high time to tackle this, and I hope the new government will do so speedily and effectively. It will have our strong support and, if needed and requested, also our assistance. Let me finish by thanking my colleagues around the table, all their staff, and the many observers that sacrificed their sunny weekend in order to perform their important task. My particular thanks to Ambassador Taylor and his team for the, again, extraordinary effort they made and are making during their long-term observation to gather all the facts needed to assess the compliance of the country with the international commitments it has made. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Patelli. Now, Mr. Kukan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Very good afternoon to you all, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for coming to this press conference. We, the 7 members of the European Parliament, are very pleased to have been here to observe the parliamentary elections in Albania. We are fully aware of the high stakes in this contest, which is a significant step in the Albanian political process. Albania stands very high on the agenda of the European Union and of the European Parliament. We have had the opportunity to reiterate this message in our meetings with the Albanian authorities and the political parties' leaders. The European Parliament delegation subscribes to the preliminary statement that just been presented by the OSCE Special Coordinator, Mr. Patelli, on behalf of the International Election Observation Mission. I also take this opportunity to thank Ambassador Peter Taylor, head of OSCE ODIHR Election Observation Mission in Tirana, and his team for their cooperation with us. I would also like to thank my colleagues from other parliamentary assemblies for our productive collaboration. We are all here in support of Albania and its people. We were pleased that election day proceeded in an orderly and generally peaceful manner, despite reports of some irregularities. We were also encouraged by the positive results of the internationally mediated political agreement, leading to the participation of the main opposition party in the elections. We would like to highlight that all OSCE ODIHR recommendations must be fully implemented in due time before the next election, so that we avoid the previous practice. We look forward to the acknowledgement of the result by all parties and the swift formation of the government, which is of key importance in any democratic process. We would like to underline that the European Parliament fully supports Albania's accession to the European Union, provided all the necessary requirements are met. It is essential that the newly formed government moves ahead with the full implementation of all EU-related reforms, in particular the justice reform and the vetting process. We also hope that trust and confidence in the political process will be re-established through the constructive participation by all political parties in the Parliament. I will also add on a very personal note. For me, this visit was yet another visit in a series of these trips to Albania, where I had another opportunity to meet and speak to the people of Albania, people whom I admire. And I want to tell them that they have many friends in the European Union, in the European Parliament, who do care about them and about their future. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. Now, Ms. Tenay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank the Albanian people for their hospitality. It has been a privilege to be here at such a crucial time for Albanian politics and the future of the country. As a head of the OEC Parliamentary Assembly delegation, I can confirm our strong commitment with Albania. The OECPA had nearly 40 observers participating in this mission, which is an indication of the importance that we attach to Albanian politics and the faith that we have in this country. I reiterate our support for the joint statement of preliminary findings and conclusions being presented here today. We are spared no efforts to depict as accurately as possible our assessment of all aspects of this electoral cycle. This said, I would like to highlight a few points. The political agreement that was reached on the 18th of May between the Socialist Party and Democratic Party has preempted a potentially dangerous deterioration of the political environment, which would have certainly negatively impacted on Albania's foreign policy ambitions of integration into the European Union and ongoing domestic reforms. The agreement poses some challenges in implementing its provisions under the time constraints. For example, to the Central Election Commission, which face a complex set of legal, institutional, and financial challenges. However, it is important to acknowledge that the agreement has kick-started a longer-term process which, in my view, and with the necessary political will, can address long-standing issues linked with misuse of administrative resources, vote buying, and pressure on voters and public administration. In addition, with the agreement, which I've already highlighted positively, I would also like to stress the overall good performance of the election administration bodies, despite some challenges posed by late implementation of the agreement. The Central Election Commission operated transparently with regular publication, and I myself had an opportunity to witness the professionalism and competence of voting Central Commission here in Tirana. The campaign presented a variety of political options. Fundamental freedoms of assembly and expression were respected. The media provided extensive campaign coverage and offered an ample range of information that enabled voters to make an informed decision. Media coverage, however, often focuses more on parties' activities than analysis of their platform, could be improved. In conclusion, I witness a broad desire to overcome once and for all the political gridlock which has held Albania back for too long. I sincerely hope that this momentum, triggered by the political agreement, will be exploited to the fullest in the best interest of our Albanian friends and their domestic ambition and aspiration for integration into the European Union. We will continue to support Albania. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And Ambassador Taylor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for being with us here this afternoon. In their statements, my colleagues have covered much of the information contained in our joint preliminary statement. So I will do my best not to repeat too much of what I have already said. I will underline some particular points related to the process that our mission from the OSCE Office of Democratic Institutions and Human Rights have been observing during the 6 odd weeks that we have been here. You may recall our mission opened on May the 9th. On election day, we had 120 ODIHR teams, that's 230 persons, in addition to the parliamentarian teams. So all in all, those of us who sit here, we represent 304 observers, international observers. You have already heard much about the effect of the political agreement that allowed these elections to take place with the participation of the opposition. You have also heard about the negative effects of undue and unrecognized politicization of the electoral process. One of these negative effects is that it has blocked efforts to follow up, as we have heard, on recommendations made to address shortcomings identified in previous elections. Such efforts need to be a priority for the newly elected government, for the parliament, for the newly elected parliament, the government that will be formed, but also for the civil society at large. Clearly, there is a need to depoliticize the nature of the electoral administration. Election staff need to be recruited on time and provided with proper training. This highly politicized nature of the nomination of the process prevents that from happening, and that has been very obvious during the last few days. This is far from a new phenomenon, and I think it's time to address this in an effective and meaningful way, as has already been stated. Efforts clearly are needed to be made to increase public trust in the electoral process. Widespread allegations of vote buying, concerns over the misuse of state resources, and pressure on voters, all that together does not contribute to building that trust. The issue is also far from new, and real concrete measures, as has already been said, need to be put in place to end these practices. That said, election assessment is not only about pointing out shortcomings, but also identifying positive elements in the process. As today's preliminary statement clearly says, fundamental freedoms, including the assembly, freedom of assembly and expression, were respected in the campaign, where candidates were able to campaign freely. Voters were provided with a variety of political options. Women and national minorities took part, although we noticed that they were underrepresented in election administration, including in decision-making positions. These elements provide something to build on, the basis for future improvements to the electoral process. The voters, all Albanian citizens, deserve this. And it is the political actors, and I mean all political actors, to deliver on this. And let me also add, on a slightly more personal note, that during the weeks I have been here, I have met many very impressive, very skilled, and very talented Albanians. So there is a strong base for such a development. Today's joint statement presents our assessment of these elections. In roughly 8 weeks from now, ODIHR will release a more comprehensive final report, which will also contain recommendations as how the shortcomings identified can be addressed. As always, and as already been said here from the partners, ODIHR will offer to provide support and expertise in the implementation of such recommendations. Before I end, let me, on behalf of my mission, express gratitude for extremely good cooperation that we have had with our parliamentarian partners and colleagues. And I would like to extend a very special thank you to our special coordinator, Mr. Bartelli. Thank you very much for leading us. I would also like to say thank you to the to the government, to the different institutions of the administration, political parties, civil societies, and many others whom we have met and with whom we have cooperated. But in particular, I would, as head of the OSCE ODIHR Election Observation Mission, like to thank my own dedicated staff, national and international, at headquarters, but also in particular, as already mentioned, all observers, long-term, short-term, their drivers, their interpreters, who still continue to follow the ongoing electoral process as votes are still being counted. They have given me, and I think I can say us, all the support and advice that we have needed. And I would like to extend a very special thank you to those who are still working while we are sitting here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. So we do have time for some questions now. I'm not sure if we have a microphone in the room. Oh, yes, we do. So your question, please. This is for journalists only, so please identify your media outlet and direct it to the individual.
Përshëndetje, quhem Raimund Delekia nga Vision Plus. Kam një pyetje për zotin Kuga. A ishte kjo garë elektorale një kusht i plotësuar për të hapur negociatat për antarësi? Faleminderit.
Mr. Kukan?
I would not be responsible if I answer this question because it was put in a very simplified way. Of course, any elections are important, especially in the situation with Albania, which on its European way is now the candidate country waiting to get the date for starting of the accession negotiations. We are also waiting for it in Brussels. No question, these elections, how they were organized, how was the election campaign, but also how is transition of power going to take place, whether the leader of party which was defeated would admit that he was defeated, whether he would congratulate the winner, whether the winner will respect the defeated partner in a dignified way. That was the case, by the way, after the previous Albanian elections. We were all very pleasantly surprised that it was done in a very civilized way. So at least this should be repeated, or maybe even better. And the Commission, which is going to write this report with recommendation concerning the date for starting of the election negotiations, will definitely take into account all these factors which I mentioned, but also it's a more complex issue. We were speaking about the implementations of the judiciary reform, the vetting process. All these issues will be taken into consideration when this issue is going to be considered. I can seriously tell you that European Parliament is maybe the biggest supporter of the enlargement process, including Albania, but provided we get serious information about the fulfillment of your requirements.
Anybody else?
Përshëndetje, nga promoting nga reporti Elicion. Nga pyetje për zotin Kukan, I cili është zyrtar në Vendin Lokal të Shqipërisë. Sikur në deklaratë publikuar në këtë zgjedhje ka pasur disa akuza për vota për kërje vota, dhe sipas raportit të deklaratash së parë kanë informuar bezimin e zgjedhjeve. Do të sjellë në vëmendje se këto deklarata janë bërë kryesisht nga zyrtarët parlamentaristë të Shqipërisë,
Well, you are pushing me to be diplomatic in my answers, because there is no simple yes or no answer to it. Our colleague, I was signaling to them, they have the most exact information about the occurrence of the vote buying or whatever. The truth is that Mr. Mehta was or is elected president in the parliament by the legal or constitutional majority. That's okay. And I would answer that in our countries, the president is not a party member, and because he has to perform the objective responsibility towards all the population of the country. So the answer you can find thinking about my statement.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? It looks like that's about it. Is there one more? Oh yes.
Shëndetje në me që do të qenë në kryet të do të të bateli. A mund të më thoni nëse Shqipëria i plotësoj standarde për zgjedhje, sepse përmendet disa procedura të shkelura, shqiptërinë e votave, personelin e administrata e tjerë. Por a mund të thuhet në deklaratën tuaj paraprake se Shqipëria plotësoj standardet e zgjedhjeve, për cilat i përvini këtu në Shqipëri për të shkuar?
Understand?
Okay. I think that Albania can do much better, generally speaking, and deserves much better. It is a matter of fact that the changes that the political agreement contains, they forced the administration to act and work out of the legal existing framework. We also praised the administration. We didn't criticize it fully, because they did a good job, considering that many deadlines were missed. There was no proper time to organize things due to the content of the agreement and so on. This issue of or allegations or whatever, of vote buying, of intimidation, of threats that you will lose your working post if you don't vote properly and so on. This is not a new phenomenon. It's going on for years, for too many years. And this is also contained in this concept of the total politicization of everything. Approving and respecting laws that would reduce to the minimum these dangers, it is for sure one of the first tasks to be tackled by the new government. It is time that Albania makes a significant move forward normality and forward in the path that Albania has chosen to join the European Union. So do it. Civil society, the media can help in doing this job, and of course, in first row, politics, the politicians, members of parliament, the parliament as a democratic institution, the government that is an expression of the majority in the parliament, and so it must be you know, completely consistent with its mandate and so on. So I was a little bit disappointed because I was expecting that these elections will be better, you know, but they are almost the same that the previous ones. Still, they are, what can I say? They were good enough in order to have enough stability in the country to do the proper job.
Thank you. We may have time for one more question, if anybody has one. Otherwise, I guess we can wrap up. Thank you very much. Okay, one more question, please.
Ariana Mera de Televizion Europës, në lutëm për ambasadorin zotin Peter Taylor. Në fakt të shpjegoj nga Televizion Europës është a ndikojnë rezultatet kombëtare të zgjedhjeve paraqësitë e vërtetura nga ana juaj.
Did we get that? I had a little trouble with the translation. Ambassador Taylor, perhaps?
Thank you very much. I think this is a continuation of the answer we just listened to from Mr. Bartelli. It's still an ongoing process. Votes are still being counted. And my mission will stay in the country for another period. What comes after election day, what I tried to say before, we have been here to observe a long process starting pre-election. We have election day. Now we are in the what comes afterwards, and there is which I think is sort of, you're alluding to the question, is how does the administration deal with complaints and things like that. We are ready to assess it when the complaints have been put on the table, and it's of course also very important how the administration deals with the complaints. We don't have a result, so we have nothing to comment on. So for us it's much more important now, when our partners and colleagues sitting up with me here, that we stay and that we will continue to follow the complaints, sort of handling of the complaints, which will be for a while. That's why we are staying, in order to end up at the final report, also with the final recommendation. That is where this comes in. We have to have a proper assessment, and based on this assessment, only then we can make the recommendation. But I think, as has been said already by all of us, when we reach that point, there will be support, if I heard my parliamentarian colleagues correctly, from the parliamentarians, and it will also come from the institution which I represent.
Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you to our panel. I'd like to announce that the full statement of preliminary findings will be available outside of this room, so please grab a copy on your way out, and it's also on our website, OSC. Thank you for coming.